Know, O Prince, that between the years when the oceans drank Atlantis and the rise of the sons of Arias, there lay an age undreamed of, when shining kingdoms lay like blue mantles beneath the stars.
Over shadowy spires and gleaming towers lay the ghostly darkness and silence that runs before dawn. Into a dim alley, one of a veritable labyrinth of mysterious winding ways, 4 masked figures came hurriedly from a door which a dusky hand furtively opened. They spoke not, but went swiftly into the gloom, cloaks wrapped closely about them. As silently as the ghosts of murdered men, they disappeared into the darkness. Behind them, a sardonic countenance was framed in the partly opened door. A pair of evil eyes glittered with malevolence in the gloom.
Go into the night, low creatures, O fools. Your doom hounds your heels like a blind dog, and you know it not.
The speaker closed the door and bolted it, then turned and went up the corridor, candle in hand. He was a somber giant of Stygian blood, dark-haired and dark-skinned. The Stygian came into an inner chamber where a tall, lean man in worn velvet lounged like a great lazy cat on a silken couch, sipping wine from a huge goblet.
Well, Ascalante, your dupes have slunk into the streets like rats from their burrows. You work with strange tools.
Tools? Why, they consider me that. 4 months now, ever since the rebel force summoned me from the southern desert, I have been living in the very heart of my enemies. Hiding by day in this obscure house, skulking through dark alleys and darker corridors at night. And I have accomplished what those rebellious nobles could not. Working through them and through other agents, many of whom have never seen my face, I have honeycombed the empire with sedition and unrest. In short, I, working in the shadows, have paved the downfall for the king. By Mitra, I was a statesman before I was an outlaw.
And these dupes, who deem themselves your masters?
They will continue to think that I serve them until our present task is completed. Who are they to match wits with Ascalante? Volmana, the dwarfish count of Caraban? Gramo, the giant commander of the Black Legion? Dion, the fat baron of Attalus? Rinaldo, the harebrained minstrel? I am the force which has welded together the steel in each, and by the clay in each, I will crush them when the time comes. But that lies in the future. Tonight, the king dies.
Days ago, I saw the Imperial squadrons ride from the city.
They rode to the frontier, which the heathen picks assail, thanks to the strong liquor which I have smuggled over the border to madden them. Dion's great wealth made that possible, and Volmana made it possible to dispose of the rest of the Imperial troops which remained in the city.
Through his princely kin in the media, it was easy to persuade King Numa to request the presence of Count Trossolo of Poitain, Seneschal of Aquilonia. And, of course, to do him honor, he'll be accompanied by an imperial escort, as well as his own troops and Prospero, King Conan's right-hand man. That leaves only the king's personal bodyguard in the city, beside the Black Legion. Through Grommel, I've corrupted a spendthrift officer of that guard, and I bribed him to lead his men away from the king's door at midnight. Then, with 16 desperate rogues of mine, we enter the palace by a secret tunnel. After the deed is done, even if the people do not rise to welcome us, Grommel's Black Legion will be sufficient to hold both the city and the crown.
And Dion thinks that crown will be given to him?
Yes, the fat fool claims it by reason of a trace of royal blood. Conan makes a bad mistake in letting men live who still boast descent from the old dynasty from which he tore the crown of Aquilonia. Volmana wishes to be reinstated in royal favor as he was under the old regime, so that he may lift his poverty-ridden estates back to their former grandeur. Grommel hates Palantides, commander of the Black Dragons, and he desires the command of the whole army. Alone of all of us, Ronaldo has no personal ambition. He simply sees in Conan a red-handed, rough-footed barbarian who came out of the north to plunder a civilized land. He idealizes the king whom Conan killed to get the crown, remembering only that he occasionally patronized the arts and forgetting the evils of his reign. And he is making the people forget. Already they openly sing the Lament for the King, in which Ronaldo lauds the sainted villain and denounces Conan as that black-hearted savage from the abyss. Conan laughs, but the people, they snarl.
Why does he hate Conan?
Poets always hate those in power. To them, perfection is always just behind the last corner or just beyond the next. They escape the present in dreams of the past and of the future. Ronaldo is a flaming torch of idealism rising, as he thinks, to overthrow a tyrant and liberate the people. As for me, well, a few months ago, I had lost all ambition but to raid the caravans for the rest of my life. Now, old dreams stir. Conan will die. Dion will mount the throne. Then, he too will die. One by one, all who oppose me will die. By fire or steel or those deadly wines you know so well how to brew. Ascalante, king of Aquilonia. How like you the sound of it?
King of Aquilonia. There was a time when I too had my ambitions, beside which yours seem tawdry and childish. To what a state I have fallen. My old-time peers and rivals would stare indeed, could they see Thothamon of the Ring serving as the slave of an outlander, and an outlaw at that, and aiding in the petty ambitions of barons and kings.
You laid your trust in magic and mummery. I trust only my wits and my sword.
Wits and swords are as straws against the wisdom of the darkness. Had I not lost the ring, our positions might be reversed.
Nevertheless, you wear the stripes of my whip on your back, and you are likely to continue to wear them.
Be not sure! Some day, somehow, I will find the ring again, and when I do, by the serpent fangs of Set, You shall pay!
The hot-tempered Aquilonian started up and struck him heavily across the mouth. Thoth reeled back, blood starting from his lips.
You grow overbold, dog! Have a care. I am still your master who knows your dark secret. Go up on the housetops and shout that Ascalante is in the city plotting against the king, if you dare.
I dare not.
No, you dare not. For if I die by your stealth or treachery, a hermit priest in the southern desert will know of it and will break the seal of a manuscript I left in his hands. And, having read, a word will be whispered in Stygia. A wind will creep up from the south by night. And where will you hide your head, Totemon?
The slave shuddered, and his face went ashen.
Bah! Enough of this! I have work for you. I do not trust Dion. I bade him ride to his country estate and remain there until the work tonight is done. The fat fool could never conceal his nervousness before the king. Ride after him, and if you do not overtake him on the road, proceed to his estate and remain by his side until we send for him. Do not let him out of your sight. He is mazed with fear and might bolt, might even rush to Conan in a panic and reveal the whole plot, hoping thus to save his own hide. Now go!
The slave bowed, hiding the hate in his eyes, and did as he was bidden. Ascalante turned again to his wine. Over the jeweled spires rose at dawn, crimson as blood. The room was large and ornate, with rich tapestries on the polished, paneled walls, deep rugs on the ivory floor, and with the lofty ceiling adorned with intricate carvings and silver scrollwork. Behind an ivory, gold-inlaid writing table sat a man whose broad shoulders and sun-browned skin seemed out of place among those luxuriant surroundings. He seemed more a part of the sun and winds and high places of the outlands. His slightest movement spoke of steel spring muscles knit to a keen brain with the coordination of a born fighting man. There was nothing deliberate or measured about his actions. Either he was perfectly at rest, still as a bronze statue, or else he was in motion, not with the jerky quickness of overtense nerves, but with a cat-like speed that blurred the sight which tried to follow him. His garments were of rich fabric, but simply made. He wore no ring or ornaments, and his square-cut, black mane was confined merely by a cloth of silver band about his head. Now he laid down the golden stylus with which he had been laboriously scrawling on waxed papyrus, resting his chin on his fist, and fixed his smoldering blue eyes enviously on the man who stood before him. This person was occupied in his own affairs at the moment, for he was taking up the laces of his gold-chased armor and abstractedly whistling, a rather unconventional performance, considering the man was in the presence of a king.
Prospero, these matters of statecraft weary me as all the fighting I've done never could.
All part of the game, Conan. You are king. You must play the part.
Oh, how I wish I might ride with you to Nimedia. It seems ages since I had a horse between my knees. But Publius says that affairs in the city requires my presence. Curse him. When I overthrew the old dynasty, it was easy enough, though it seemed bitter hard at the time. Looking back now, over the wild path I followed, all those days of toil, intrigue, slaughter, and tribulation seemed like a dream. But I did not dream far enough, Prospero. When King Numidides lay dead at my feet, and I tore the crown from his gory head, and I set it on my own, I had reached the ultimate border of my dreams. I had prepared myself to take the crown, but not to hold it. In the old free days, all I wanted was a sharp sword and a straight path to my enemies, but now no paths are straight, and my sword is, well, useless. When I overthrew Numidides, then I was the liberator. And now they spit at my shadow. They have put a statue of that swine in the temple of Mitra. And people go and wail before it, hailing it as the holy effigy of a saintly monarch who was done to death by some kind of red-handed barbarian. When I led her armies to victory, as a mercenary, Aquilonia kindly overlooked the fact that I was a foreigner. But now, she cannot forgive me. Now, in Mitra's temple, they come to burn incense to Numidides' memory. Men whom his hangmen maimed and blinded. Men whose sons died in his dungeons, whose wives and daughters were dragged into his harem. The fickle fools.
Ronaldo is largely responsible. He sings songs that make men mad. Hang him in his jester's garb to the highest tower in the city, and let him make rhymes for the vultures.
No, Prospero. He is beyond my reach. A great poet is greater than any king. His songs are mightier than my scepter, for he has nearly ripped the heart from my breast when he chose to sing for me. I shall die and be forgotten, but Ronaldo's songs will live forever. No, Prospero, there is something hidden, some undercurrent of which we are not aware. I sense it, as in my youth I sensed a tiger hidden in the tall grass. There is a nameless unrest throughout the kingdom. I am like a hunter who crouches by a small fire amid the forest and hears stealthy feet padding in the darkness, and almost sees the glimmer of burning eyes. If I could but come to grips with something tangible, something I could cleave with my sword, I tell you, it's not by chance that the pigs have of late so fiercely assailed the frontiers, so that the Bessonians have called for aid to beat them back. I should have ridden with the troops.
Publius feared a plot to trap and slay you beyond the frontier. That is why he urged you to remain in the city. These doubts are born of your barbarian instincts. Let the people snarl. The mercenaries are ours, the Black Dragons, and every rogue in Poitain swears by you. Your only danger is assassination, and that's impossible, with men of the Imperial troops guarding you day and night. You must put these thoughts from your mind, Conan. Come, tell me, what are you working at there?
A map. The maps of the court show well the countries of south, east, and west, but in the north they are vague and faulty. I am adding the northern lands myself. Here is Cimmeria, where I was born, and
Asgard and Vanaheim? By Mitra, I had almost thought those countries to have been fantastical.
ha! You had known otherwise, had you spent your youth on the northern frontiers of Cimmeria. Asgard lies to the north, and Vanaheim to the northwest of Cimmeria, and there's continual war along the borders.
And what manner of men are these northern folk?
Tall and fair and blue-eyed. Their god is Ymir, the frost giant, and each tribe has its own king. They are wayward and fierce. They fight all day and drink ale and roar their wild songs all night.
Haha, then I think you are like them.
You laugh greatly, drink deep, and bellow good songs. Though, I confess, I never saw another Cimmerian who drank aught but water, or who ever laughed, or ever sang anything save to chant dismal dirges.
Perhaps it is Cimmeria. A gloomier land never was, full of hills, darkly wooded, and the skies nearly always grey, with winds moaning drearily down the valleys.
Then I suppose it is little wonder that men grow moody there.
Cimmerians have no hope, here or the hereafter. The gods of Crom and his dark race who rule over a sunless place of everlasting mist, which is the world of the dead. Mitra, the ways of the Aesir were more to my liking.
Well, the dark hills of Cimmeria are far behind you, my king. And now, I go. I'll be sure to quaff a goblet of white Nemedian wine for you at Numa's court.
Good. But kiss Numa's dancing girls for yourself only, lest you involve the state.
The sun was setting, etching the green and hazy blue of the forest in brief gold. The waning beams glinted on the thick golden chain which Dion of Attalus twisted continually in his pudgy hand as he sat in the flaming riot of blossoms and flowering trees, which was his garden. He shifted his fat body on his marble seat and glanced furtively about, as if in quest of a lurking enemy. He sat within a circular grove of slender trees, whose overlapping branches cast a thick shade over him. Near at hand, a fountain tinkled silverly, and other unseen fountains in various parts of the great garden whispered an everlasting symphony. Dion was alone, except for the great figure which lounged on a marble bench close at hand, watching the Baron with deep, somber eyes. Dion gave little thought to Thothamon. He vaguely knew that he was a slave in whom Ascalante reposed much trust, but like so many rich men, Dion paid scant heed to men below his own station in life.
You need not be so nervous. The plot cannot fail.
Ascalante can make mistakes as well as any other.
Not he. Else I would be his master, not a slave.
Eh? What talk is this?
Thothamon's eyes narrowed. For all his iron self-control, he was near bursting with long pent-up shame, hate, and rage, ready to take any sort of desperate chance. What he did not reckon on was the fact that Dion saw him not as a human being with a brain and a wit, but simply as a slave, and as such, a creature beneath notice.
Listen to me. You will be king, but you little know the mind of Ascalante. You cannot trust him once Conan is slain. I can help you. If you will protect me when you come to power, I will aid you. Listen, my lord, listen! I was a great sorcerer in the south. Men spoke of Thothamon as they spoke of Ramon. King Tesman of Stygia gave me great honor, casting down the magicians from the high places to exalt me above them. They hated me, but they feared me, for I controlled beings from outside which came at my call and did my bidding. By Set, mine enemy knew not the hour when he might awake at midnight to feel the taloned fingers of a nameless horror at his throat. I did dark and terrible magic with the serpent ring of Set, which I found in the nighted tomb a league beneath the earth, forgotten before the first man crawled out of the slimy sea. But a thief stole the ring, and my power was broken. The magicians rose up to slay me, and I fled. Disguised as a camel driver, I was traveling in a caravan in the land of Koth when Ascalante's rebus fell upon us. All in the caravan were slain except myself. I saved my life by revealing my identity to Ascalante and swearing to serve him. Bitter has been that bondage. To hold me fast, he wrote of me in a manuscript, and sealed it, and gave it into the hands of a hermit who dwells on the southern borders of Koth. I dare not strike a dagger into him while he sleeps, or betray him to his enemies, for then the hermit would open the manuscript and read. Thus Ascalante has instructed him, and he would speak a word in Stygia. Men knew me not in Aquilonia, but should my enemies in Stygia learn my whereabouts, not the width of half a world between us would suffice to save me from such a doom as would blast the soul of a bronze statue. Only a king with castles and hosts of swordsmen could protect me. So I have told you my secret, and urge that you make a pact with me, my lord. I can aid you with my wisdom, and you can protect me, and someday I will find the ring.
What's that? Ring? Ring?
Toth had underestimated the man's utter egoism. Dion had not even been listening to the slave's words, so completely engrossed was he in his own thoughts. But the final word stirred a ripple in his self-centeredness.
That makes me remember. My ring of good fortune. I had it from a Shemetish thief who swore he stole it from a wizard far to the south. He said it would bring me luck. I paid him enough, Mitra knows. By the gods, I need all the luck I can have, what with Vomana and Escalante dragging me into their bloody plots. I'll see to the ring.
Toth sprang up, blood mounting darkly to his face while his eyes flamed with the stunned fury of a man who suddenly realizes the full depths of a fool's swinish stupidity. Dion never heeded him. Lifting a secret lid in the marble seat, he fumbled for a moment among a heap of gewgaws of various kinds, barbaric charms, bits of bones, bits of tawdry jewelry, luck pieces, and conjures, which the man's superstitious nature had prompted him to collect.
Ah, here it is.
Dion triumphantly lifted a ring of curious make. It was of a metal like copper, and was made in the form of a scaled serpent coiled in 3 loops, with its tail in its mouth. Its eyes were yellow gems which glittered balefully. Totamon cried out as if he had been struck, and Dion wheeled and gaped, his face suddenly bloodless. The slave's eyes were blazing, his mouth wide, his huge, dusky hands outstretched like talons.
The ring. By Set, the ring. My ring. Stolen from me.
Steel glittered in the Stygian's hand, and with a heave of his great shoulders he drove the dagger into the Baron's fat body. Dion's high, thin squeal broke in a strangled gurgle, and his whole flabby frame collapsed like melted butter. A fool to the end, he died in mad terror, not knowing why. Flinging aside the crumpled corpse, already forgetful of it, Toth grasped the ring in both hands, his eyes blazing with a fearful avidness.
My ring. My power.
How long he crouched over the baleful thing, motionless as a statue, drinking the evil aura of it into his dark soul. Not even the Stygian knew. When he shook himself from his reverie and drew back his mind from the nighted abysses where it had been questing, the moon was rising, casting long shadows across the smooth marble back of the garden seat, at the foot of which sprawled the darker shadow which had been the Lord of Attalus.
Escalante. No more.
Toth's eyes burned red as a vampire's in the gloom. He stooped and cupped a handful of congealing blood from the sluggish pool in which his victim sprawled, rubbing it in the copper serpent's eyes until the yellow sparks were covered by a crimson mask.
Blind your eyes, mystic serpent. Blind your eyes to the moonlight, and open them on darker gulfs. What do you see, O serpent of Set? Whom do you call from the gulfs of the night? Whose shadow falls on the waning light? Call him to me, O serpent of Set.
Stroking the scales with a peculiar circular motion of his fingers, a motion which always carried the fingers back to their starting place. Torthomon's voice sank still lower as he whispered dark names and grisly incantations forgotten the world over, save in the grim hinterlands of dark Stygia, where monstrous shapes move in the dusk of the tombs. There was a movement in the air about him, such a swirl as is made in water when some creature rises to the surface. A nameless, freezing wind blew on him briefly, as if from an opened door. Toth felt a presence at his back, but he did not look about. He kept his eyes fixed on the moonlit space of marble on which a tenuous shadow hovered. As he continued his whispered incantations, this shadow grew in size and clarity until it stood out, distinct and horrific. Its outline was not unlike that of a gigantic baboon, but no such baboon ever walked the earth, not even in Stygia. Still, Toth did not look, but drawing from his girdle a sandal of his master, always carried in the dim hope that he might be able to put it to such a use. He cast it behind him.
Know it well, slave of the ring. Find him who wore it and destroy him. Look into his eyes and blast his soul before you tear out his throat. Kill him, and anyone with him.
Toth saw the horror etched on the moonlit wall. It lowered its misshapen head and took the scent like some hideous hound. Then, the grisly head was thrown back, and the thing wheeled and was gone like a wind through the trees. The Stygian flung up his arms in a maddened exultation, and his teeth and eyes gleamed in the moonlight. There was a swirling rush of wind, and then the demon was gone, as if it had only been a hallucination or some foul nightmare. King Conan slumbered and dreamed alone in the great sleeping chamber with its high golden dome. Through swirling gray mists, he heard a curious call, faint and far, and though he did not understand it, it seemed not within his power to ignore. Sword in hand, he went through the gray mist as a man might walk through clouds, and the voice grew more distinct as he proceeded, until he understood the word it spoke. It was his own name that was being called across the gulfs of space or time. Now, the mists grew lighter, and he saw that he was in a great dark corridor that seemed to be cut in solid black stone. It was unlighted, but by some magic he could see plainly. The floor, ceiling, and walls were highly polished and gleamed dull, and they were carved with the figures of ancient heroes and half-forgotten gods. He shuddered to see the vast, shadowy outlines of the nameless Old Ones, and he knew somehow that mortal feet had not traversed the corridor for centuries. Conan came upon a wide stair carved in the solid rock, and the sides of the shaft were adorned with esoteric symbols so ancient and horrific that King Conan's skin crawled. The steps were carved each with the abhorrent figure of the old serpent Set, so that at each step he planted his heel on the head of the snake. as it was intended from old times. But he was nonetheless at ease for all that. The voice called him on, and at last, in darkness that would have been impenetrable to his material eyes, he came into a strange crypt and saw a vague, white-bearded figure sitting on a tomb. Conan's hair rose up, and he grasped his sword, but the figure spoke in sepulchral tones.
Do you know me, old man?
Not I, by Crom.
I am Epimetheus.
But Epimetheus the Sage has been dead for 1,500 years.
Hearken to me, hero. As a pebble cast into a dark lake sends ripples to the further shores, happenings in the unseen world have broken like waves upon my slumber. I have marked you well, Conan of Cimmeria, and the stamp of mighty happenings and great deeds is upon you. Doom is loose in the land, against which your sword cannot aid you.
Ah, you speak in riddles. Let me see my foe, and I will cleave his skull to the teeth.
Loose your barbarian fury against your foes of flesh and blood. It is not against men that I must shield you. There are dark worlds, barely guessed by man, wherein formless monsters stalk. Fiends, which may be drawn from the outer voids to take material shape and rend and devour at the bidding of evil magicians. There is a serpent in your house, O king, an adder in your kingdom, come up from Stygia with the dark wisdom of the shadows in his murky soul. As a man sleeping dreams of the serpent which crawls near him, I have felt the fell presence of Set's neophyte. He is drunk with terrible power, and the blows he strikes at his enemy may well bring down the kingdom. I have called you to me to give you a weapon against him and his hellhound pack.
But why? The men say you sleep in the black heart of Golomyra, whence you sent forth your ghosts on unseen wings to aid Aquilonia in times of need. But I'm an outlander, and a barbarian.
Peace, O great king. Your destiny is one with Aquilonia. Gigantic happenings are forming in the web and the womb of fate, and a blood-mad sorcerer shall not stand in the path of imperial destiny. Ages ago, Set coiled about the world like a python about its prey. All my life, which was as the lives of 3 common men, I fought him. I drove him into the shadows of the mysterious south, but in dark Stygia, men still worship that, which to us is the archdemon. As I fought Set, I fight his worshippers, and his votaries, and his acolytes. Hold out your sword.
Conan did so, and on the great blade, close to the heavy silver guard, the ancient traced with a bony finger a strange symbol that glowed like white fire in the shadows. Then the crypt, tomb, and ancient vanished, and Conan, bewildered, sprang from his couch in the great domed chamber, roused from sleep with a great sure of wakefulness. He stood bewildered at the strangeness of his dream. Conan realized that he was gripping his sword in his hand. His hair prickled at the nape of his neck, for on the broad blade was carven a symbol, the outline of a phoenix. He remembered that on the tomb in the crypt he had seen what he thought to be a similar figure carven of stone. Now he wondered if it had been but a stone figure at all, and his skin crawled at the strangeness of it. A stealthy sound in the corridor outside caused his head to snap towards the door, and without stopping to investigate, he began to don his armor. Again, he was the barbarian, suspicious and alert as a gray wolf at bay. 20 furtive figures stole through the silence which shrouded the corridors of the royal palace. Their stealthy feet, bare or cased in soft leather, made no sound, either on thick carpet or bare marble tile. The torches which stood in niches along the halls gleamed red on dagger, sword, and keen-edged axe.
Stop that cursed loud breathing, whoever it is. The officer of the night guard has removed most of the sentries from these halls and made the rest drunk, but we must be careful just the same. Back! Here come the guard!
They crowded back behind a cluster of carven pillars, and almost immediately 10 giants in black armor swung by at a measured pace. Their faces showed doubt as they glanced at the officer who was leading them away from their post of duty. This officer was rather pale. As the guard passed the hiding places of the conspirators, he was seen to wipe the sweat from his brow with a shaky hand. He was young, and this betrayal of a king did not come easy to him. He mentally cursed the vainglorious extravagance which had put him in debt to the moneylenders and made him a pawn of scheming politicians. The guardsman clanked by and disappeared up the corridor.
Good. Conan sleeps unguarded. Haste. If they catch us killing him, we're undone, but few men will espouse the cause of a dead king. Aye, haste. My blade is thirsty, and I can hear the gathering of vultures. Onwards!
They hurried down the corridor with reckless speed and stopped before a gilded door which bore the royal dragon symbol of Aquilonia.
Grommel, break it down!
The giant drew a deep breath and launched his mighty frame against the panels, which groaned and bent at the impact. Again, he crouched and plunged. With a snapping of bolts and a rending crash of wood, the door splintered and burst inward.
In! Charge! Death to the tyrant!
They stopped short. Conan faced them, not a naked man roused, amazed, and unarmed out of deep sleep to be butchered like a sheep, but a barbarian, wide awake and at bay, partly armored, with his long sword in his hand.
In, you dogs! He is 20 to 1 and has no helmet!
The king glared, puzzled as to their identity. Ascalante he did not know. He could not see through the closed visors of the armored conspirators, and Ronaldo had pulled his slouch cap down above his eyes. But there was no time for surmise. With a yell that rang to the roof, the killers flooded into the room, Grommel first. He came like a charging bull, head down, sword low for the disemboweling thrust. Conan sprang to meet him, and all of his tigerish strength went into the arm that swung the sword. In a whistling arc, the great blade flashed through the air and crashed on the Bostonian's helmet. Blade and casque shivered together, and Grommel rolled lifeless on the floor. Conan bounded back, still gripping the broken hilt. Then the rest of the pack were upon him. A dagger point raked along his ribs between breastplate and backplate. A sword edge flashed before his eyes. He flung aside the dagger wielder with his left arm and smashed his broken hilt like a cestus into the swordsman's temple. The man's brains spattered in his face.
Watch the door, 5 of you!
Ascalante danced about the edge of the singing steel whirlpool, for he feared that Conan might smash through their midst and escape. The rogues drew back momentarily as their leader seized several and thrust them toward the single door, and in that brief respite, Conan leapt to the wall and tore therefrom an ancient battle-axe which, untouched by time, had hung there for half a century. With his back to the wall, he faced the closing ring for a flashing instant, then leapt into the thick of them. He was no defensive fighter. Even in the teeth of overwhelming odds, he always carried the war to the enemy. Any other man would have already died there, and Conan himself did not hope to survive. But he did ferociously wish to inflict as much damage as he could before he fell. His barbaric soul was ablaze, and the chants of old heroes were singing in his ears. As he sprang from the wall, his axe dropped an outlaw with a severed shoulder, and the terrible backhand return crushed the skull of another. Swords whined venomously about him, but death passed him by breathless margins. The Cimmerian moved in, a blur of blinding speed. He was like a tiger among baboons as he leapt, sidestepped, and spun, offering an ever-moving target while his axe wove a shining wheel of death about him. For a brief space, the assassins crowded him fiercely, raining blows blindly and hampered by their own numbers. Then, they gave back suddenly. 2 more corpses on the floor gave mute evidence of the king's fury, though Conan himself was bleeding from wounds on arm, neck, and legs.
Knaves! Cowards! Do you shrink from combat? Shall the despot live? Out on it!
He rushed in, hacking madly, but Conan, recognizing him, shattered his sword with a short, terrific chop, and with a powerful push of his open hand, sent him reeling to the floor. The king took Ascalante's point in his left arm, and the outlaw barely saved his life by ducking and springing backward from the swinging axe. Again the wolves swirled in, and Conan's axe sang and crushed. A hairy rascal stooped beneath its stroke and dived at the king's legs, but after wrestling for a brief instant at what seemed a solid iron tower, glanced up in time to see the axe falling, but not in time to avoid it. In the interim, one of his comrades lifted a broadsword with both hands and hewed through the king's left shoulder plate, wounding the flesh beneath. In an instant, Conan's cuirass was full of blood. Volmana, flinging the attackers right and left in his savage impatience, came plowing through and hacked murderously at Conan's unprotected head. The king ducked deeply, and the sword shaved off a lock of his black hair as it whistled above him. Conan pivoted on his heel and struck in from the side. The axe crunched through the steel cuirass, and Volmana crumpled with his whole left side caved in. Conan straightened to meet another maddened rush from Ronaldo, who charged in wild and wide, open, armed only with a dagger.
Ronaldo, back! I will not slay you.
Die, tyrant!
Conan leapt back, lifting his axe. Ronaldo hurled himself headlong on the king. Conan delayed the blow he was loth to deliver until it was too late. Only when he felt the bite of the steel in his unprotected side did he strike in a frenzy of blind desperation. Ronaldo dropped with his skull shattered, and Conan reeled back against the wall, blood spurting from between the fingers which gripped his wound.
He is wounded! In now! Slay him! Slay him!
Conan put his back against the wall and lifted his axe. He stood like an image of the unconquerable primordial, legs braced far apart, head thrust forward, one hand clutching the wall for support, the other gripping the axe on high, with great, corded muscles standing out in iron ridges and his features frozen in a death snarl of fury. His eyes blazed terribly through the mist of blood which veiled them. The men faltered, wild, criminal, and dissolute though they were, yet they came of a breed of men called civilized, with a civilized background. And here was the barbarian, the natural killer. They shrank back. The dying tiger could still deal death. Conan sensed their uncertainty and grinned with ferocious mirth.
Who dies first?
Ascalante leapt like a wolf, halted almost in midair with incredible quickness, and fell prostrate to avoid the death which was hissing toward him. He frantically whirled his feet out of the way and rolled clear as Conan recovered from his missed blow and struck again. This time, the axe sank inches deep into the polished floor, close to Ascalante's revolving legs. Another misguided desperado chose that instant to charge, followed half-heartedly by his fellows. He intended to kill Conan before the Cimmerian could wrench his axe from the floor, but his judgment was faulty. The red axe lurched up and crashed down and a crimson caricature of a man catapulted backwards against the legs of the attackers. At that instant, a fearful scream burst from the rogues at the door as a black, misshapen shadow fell across the wall. All but Ascalante wheeled at that cry, and then, howling like dogs, they burst blindly through the door in a raving, blaspheming mob, and scattered through the corridors in screaming flight. Ascalante ran lightly at Conan just as the Cimmerian was perforce employing his axe arm to wipe the blood from his blinded eyes, hoping to at least kill the king before his guards brought their coup to ruin. Even as he began his charge, there was a strange rushing in the air, and a heavy weight struck terrifically between his shoulders. He was dashed headlong, and great talons sank agonizingly in his flesh. Writhing desperately beneath his attacker, Ascalante twisted his head about and stared into the face of nightmare and lunacy. Upon him crouched a great black thing, which he knew was born in no sane or human world. Its slavering black fangs were near his throat, and the glare of its yellow eyes shriveled his limbs as a killing wind shriveled young corn. The hideousness of its face transcended mere bestiality. It might have been the face of an ancient, evil mummy quickened with demonic life. In those abhorrent features, the outlaw's dilated eyes seemed to see, like a shadow in the madness that enveloped him, a faint and terrible resemblance to the slave, Torthamon. Then, Ascalante's cynical and all-sufficient philosophy deserted him, and with a ghastly cry, he gave up the ghost of sanity before those slavering fangs touched him. Conan, shaking the blood drop from his eyes, stared frozen. At first, he thought it was a great black hound which stood above Ascalante's distorted body. Then, as his sight cleared, he saw that it was neither a hound nor a baboon. With a cry that was like an echo of Ascalante's death shriek, he reeled away from the wall and met the leaping horror with a cast of his axe that had behind it all the desperate power of his electrified nerves. The flying weapon glanced, singing from the slanting skull it should have crushed, and the king was hurled halfway across the chamber by the impact of the giant body. The slavering jaws closed on the arm Conan flung up to guard his throat, but the monster made no effort to secure a death grip. Over his mangled arm it glared fiendishly into the king's eyes, in which there began to be mirrored a likeness of the horror which stared from the dead eyes of Ascalante. Conan felt his soul shrivel and begin to be drawn out of his body to drown in the yellow wells of cosmic horror which glimmered spectrally in the formless chaos that was growing about him, engulfing all life and sanity. Those eyes grew and became gigantic, and in them the Cimmerian glimpsed the reality of all the abysmal and blasphemous horrors that lurked in the outer darkness of formless voids and nighted gulfs. He opened his bloody lips to shriek hate and loathing, but only a dry rattle burst from his throat. The horror that paralyzed and destroyed Ascalante roused in the Cimmerian a frenzied fury akin to madness. With a volcanic wrench of his whole body, he plunged backward, heedless of the agony in his torn arm, dragging the monster bodily with him. His outflung hand struck something, and his dazed fighting brain recognized the hilt of his broken sword. Instinctively he gripped it and struck with all the power of nerve and thew as a man stabs with a dagger. The broken blade sank deep, and Conan's arm was released as the abhorrent mouth gaped as in agony. The king was hurled aside, and lifting himself on one hand, he saw, as one amazed, the terrible convulsions of the monster, from which thick blood was gushing through the great wound his broken blade had torn. As the king watched, its struggles ceased, and it lay jerking spasmodically, staring upward with its grisly dead eyes. Conan blinked and shook the blood from his vision. It seemed to him that the thing was melting and disintegrating into a slimy, unstable mass. Then, A medley of voices reached his ears, and the room was thronged with the finally roused people of the court. Knights, peers, ladies, men-at-arms, counselors, all babbling and shouting and getting in one another's way. The black dragons were on hand, wild with rage, swearing and ruffling, with their hands on their hilts and foreign oaths in their teeth. Of the young officer of the door guard nothing was seen, nor was he found then or later, though earnestly sought after.
By Mitra, someone call the guard. The guard is here, you old fool. Best stop your caterwauling and aid us to bind the king's wounds. He's like to bleed to death. Yes. We must bind his wounds. Send for every leech of the court. Oh, my lord, what a black shame on the city. Are you entirely slain?
Wine! Slaying is cursed. Thirsty work. See first to the wound on my side. Rinaldo wrote me a deathly song there, and keen was the stylus.
We should have hanged him long ago. No good can come of poets. Who is this? By Mitra, it is Ascalante, once the Count of Thun. What devil's work has brought him up from his desert haunts? But why does he stare so? Such a look of horror I have never seen.
Had you seen what he and I saw, you would not wonder. Lost your own gaze by looking at... Crom! The demon has melted back into the foulness that bore it. The body is gone.
No, the king is delirious.
By Bad, Morrigan, Macha, and Nemain, I am sane. It was like a cross between a Stygian mummy and a baboon. It came through the door, and Ascalante's rogues fled before it. It slew Ascalante, who was about to run me through, and then it came upon me, and I slew it. How, I know not, for my axe glanced from it as if from a rock. But I do think that the sage Epimetheus had a hand in it.
Hark how he names Epimetheus, dead these 1,500 years.
By Ymir, this night I talked with Epimetheus. He called me in my dreams, and I walked down a black stone corridor carved with old gods, to a stone stair on the steps of which were the outlines of Set, until I came to a crypt and a tomb with a phoenix carved on it.
My lord king, as the high priest of Mitra, I must ask you in his name to be silent.
Am I a slave to shut my mouth on your command?
Nay, my lord, I mean no offense. But this is a matter beyond human understanding. Only the inner circle of the priestcraft know of the black stone corridor carved in the heart of Mount Golomira by unknown hands, or of the phoenix-guarded tomb where Epimetheus was laid to rest 1,500 years ago. Since that time no living man has entered it, for his chosen priests, after placing the sage in the crypt, blocked up the outer entrance of the corridor so that no man could find it. Not even the high priests know where it is. Only by word of mouth, handed down from priest to priest, and jealously guarded, does the inner circle of Mitra's acolytes know of the resting place of Epimetheus in the black heart of Golomira. It is one of the central mysteries on which Mitra's cult stands.
I cannot say by what magic Epimetheus brought me to him, but I talked with him, and he made a mark on my sword. Why that mark made it deadly to demons, or what magic lay behind the mark, I do not know. But though the blade broke on Grommel's helmet, yet the fragment was long enough to kill the horror.
Let me see your sword, my king. Mitra, guard us against the powers of darkness. The king has indeed talked with Epimetheus this night. There, on the sword, it is the secret sign none might make but him. The emblem of the immortal phoenix which broods forever over his tomb. A candle, quick! Look again at the spot where the king said the goblin died.
It lay in the shade of a broken screen, They threw the screen aside and bathed the floor in a flood of candlelight. A shuddering silence fell over the people as they looked. Then some fell on their knees, calling on Mitra, and some fled screaming from the chamber. There on the floor, where the monster had died, there lay, like a tangible shadow, a dark, broad stain that could not be washed out. The thing had left its outline clearly etched in its blood, and that outline was of no being a sane and normal world could support. Grim and horrific it brooded there, like the shadow cast by one of the apish gods that squat on the shadowy altars of dim temples in the dark land of Stygia.